Now on this video we're going to cover two parts of making the carbon fiber seat cowl. The first part is going to be to get the fits and finishes, and a lot of the tricks that I use, little things that I've learned over many years of working with composites to make it easy to get the fits very nice. Also, another part of the job that a lot of people underestimate, making the part is really the easiest part of it. Getting the brackets, getting them installed, getting them lined up so they're not in any way interfering with the fits, and being able to take the seat cowl on and off easily. I've made a couple little tricky brackets, and I'm going to show in detail how I do it, from flexible aluminum that's made to flex over and over again. It's available from Amazon, and we're going to do that on this video. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, watch it in 4K, just adjust your settings. Now this is part 3 of our seat cowl project. This is probably the part of it that's the most difficult to explain to people, is to get the fit and the finish between the seat to be equal all around the whole edge, and to get the look, the final look we want. Now, I've got to take the seat back off the bike. We were out riding yesterday, and that's what's nice about working on a project like this. Once you have the part laid up and molded, you put the seat back on and go ride the bike. In our case today, we're going to take the strap off and work on these final fits and making the brackets. Now, it's always easier for me when I'm doing this type of work, have the bike straight up and down on the stand. Bike doesn't have a center stand, of course, because I'm going to be able to walk around the whole perimeter of the motorcycle to get those fits and finishes. Now, getting the seat off, get the strap off. Of course, if we weren't riding a bike, you wouldn't have to do this. Now, it's real simple, the working on this bike and getting these parts installed, except look at this. If you put these parts on backwards, you may not ever get the seat off again. Ask me how I know. Anyway, that is a good trick. Make sure you get those parts on right. Getting some blue painter's tape on anything that we may touch with that carbon fiber part. The carbon fiber part is going to be rough. We don't have a final smooth buffed out finish. And every time I touch this, I don't want to have it that I put a scar or a scratch in that paint. Now, it may even be in an area you wouldn't even see it, but I don't want it to be scratched anyway. And the painter's tape, it's a good way to avoid having that problem that you take the part off and you look down and you say, oh, there's a big scratch in the part. I could have eliminated that with one piece of blue tape. And that is a really good tip. Now, I like to know anywhere that the new part is going to touch has at least one layer of that blue tape down. At least one, sometimes two. And press it down, make sure there's no gaps there. That shows us where the gap is. And we don't care if it's the real part or the blue tape. Now I'm running a Sharpie marker on there to pick up the first amount. I'm doing this in little pieces, not in one giant piece. Now, using any rough grit of sandpaper on a soft sanding block, we just take a little bit off at a time. You don't want to run over and chop 1/8 of an inch off with a saw or a grinder or something. In the past, I've tried to do stuff like this with a belt sander, and it takes too much off at one time. I want to go back and forth, each time taking the thickness of that Sharpie marker line off. And this requires a little patience, but in the end, you sneak up on it and you keep finding the part that hits. Find the part that hits, put a little bit of the Sharpie marker on it, run the line down again, go out, sand a little bit of it off, and it just requires a lot of patience. But in the end, when you think about how obvious it's going to be if this is wrong, it's worth doing it. Now, I use a piece of blue fine line tape just to make sure. The only thing that shows me is if I have a little bit of a curve instead of a straight line. Well, then put on a piece of the painter's tape and just go right up to the edge of the painter's tape, and you can take the high spot off. This is the trick that I look for every time, is to find the part that's touching. Find the part that's touching. And I'm trying to put the sunlight right on it so I can see that Sharpie marker. And it's black on black, so it's a little difficult to see in bright sun. But it's good to do this outside, of course. You don't have to breathe any of the dust. It's not good to ever breathe any dust. So that's just a given. Now, going back and forth. Now I'm going to look for a spot where there's interference. Really look close. Now at the very end, it's going to be the thickness of a pen line. And that's when you really want to get fussier and fussier, more patient, more patient. And sometimes you wonder if this is all going to be worth it. Well, when that part is buffed out and on the bike permanently, you'll just taking that little high spot off. Take that little high spot off. It's back and forth. Now, I cut out a lot of this off the video to keep the video from getting too long, because I just wanted to make the point that you really do have to do this patiently. And you just can't do it. I can't do it anyway in one stroke of the pen. And that part has to sit down level with the seat. And now we get the last little bit right up in the front. Is an interference there. Now we're really getting fussy. And now the last thing on this, once I think I have it all, is to get out I have a tool that's called Permagrit. And it's a very precision tool that you would use in a machine shop or in really high quality woodworking. And it's got a carbide cutter on it. So that really lets me get a perfectly straight line then. I don't have to worry that I'm gonna, with the sanding block, I'm always gonna get a little bit of a curve if I'm not careful. This is a Permagrit tool, and it'll get at the very end, when I only have the thickness of a pen line to take off, then I go to the Permagrit tool and I can really get that where I'm happy with it. And I know at the end of this, I've got that fit as good as I possibly can. So it's a good idea anytime you take the tape off, just heat it a little bit with a hairdryer and it comes right off. Sometimes in really cold weather, like we've had this winter, and I've had tape that I wasn't really crazy about coming off. Now, doing my little final test fit. Now, if I have to adjust that so I could actually take a playing card or something and go through there and see if there's any high spot, I wanted to make sure the contour of the seat and where the cowl started, that contour looked like it came out pretty good. I was happy with that. Now the hard thing, making the brackets. In the back, the lip goes around, so it kind of holds it in place, and it's a nice, this part is a nice tight fit to the seat. Now to make the brackets, this is special aluminum. They're called fingers, for when you break your finger supports. You see how that goes if you broke your finger. You can get them from Amazon, finger supports, and a box of them, a box of 10 of them is about $5. And they're really, really cheap, but they're special aluminum that's made to bend over and over and over without fracturing and breaking. It's very soft, malleable material. Now, you got a couple of tricks. You got to get the foam off. The foam is on with a glue that nothing seems to take it off except the wire wheel. Getting that foam off can be, you try to pick it off and it never all comes off. Once you get the foam off, well, if ask me how I had trouble with this, and then the last little bit of that glue will come off with just acetone and a paper towel. You can see what happens to the rubber if you try to peel it off. Good old acetone to the rescue every time. Every time. Now, once I get that off, now I have to take these over and flatten them out. Conveniently enough, they already have the holes drilled in the right place. How convenient is that? But anyway, we got to trim one edge, hammering them flat with an ordinary hammer, and a pair of pliers, I guess you could do the same thing. But roughening it up, I don't want to have a smooth surface. So it fits right over the bolt, but I can't leave that hole there. I've got to trim it so it's actually a trough, not a hole. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to get the part on and off as conveniently as possible. The blue tape marks where it is in a forward to back relationship, but keep in mind, it's not a 90-degree bend. The bend is going to be a little bit different than 90 degrees. So you've got to kind of eyeball it, either using pliers or your bare hands. See, that's what's nice about it. You can just bend it with your bare hands. And it's made not to fracture, because those things, when they go on your finger, they're like scissors. They go on and off hundreds of times. And I've used them when I've had issues, any issue with my finger, they work great. It's always good to have a box of them around. I can press that down with my thumb to get the final little curve. The curve is important. I need to get the part that I'm not going to use, just trim it off. But for right now, a big crescent wrench would just get the final little bend. I want to make sure it's accurate and it's not going to in some way be an interference fit. Mark that with the tape. That's where it's going to have to go. Now, there's a step on this you don't want to forget. Of course, we're going to be putting glue in between that part and the seat. If any were to ooze out, it would get on the seat and ruin the cover. So it's a really, really important step not to leave out. To put some saran wrap or some blue tape over that, and it's a good idea to put more than one layer just in case you puncture it. And if you don't, and the epoxy gets on the seat, yeah, it's going to be a scar. I don't want to have that. Now, the idea we're using 5-minute epoxy here, we're going to let it dry overnight anyway. And the one thing I would not want to do is use epoxy and get it just exactly where it should be and then prematurely take those pieces off and lose the setting. Because once they're in place and I shim it with anything I can, a little piece of cardboard if I have to, a Q-tip, anything. Once I put them down, now there's only going to be epoxy between the carbon fiber and the bracket. But I'm using the seat itself as a jig to get the part in exactly the right place so that that cover is not too high or too low, but I still can shim it with washers after we're all done. That's the idea of having a flexible bracket. If you have a stiff bracket, a solid bracket, it'd be pretty much impossible to get the part off. And when I did the 650, I spent almost a whole work session trying to get this so I could do it over and over again and I could share it on a video. And this material is worth its weight in gold to have in a shop because it's flexible. The tape holds that from going too far back, and it's got to be babysit now. So now the trick is to babysit this and make sure nothing moves or changes. I've got that compressed that way, compressed this way. Even though that's 5-minute epoxy, I want that to dry overnight before I even try to take this apart. I've learned a lesson the hard way. If we lose that setting, now those brackets are set in place. I can peel them up, and because that's a special alloy of aluminum that's made to be flexible, and put big washers on them, that's going to, by putting washers underneath, higher or lower, I can make this go up and down any amount I want. This worked out great on the 650. I think it's going to work out great here. But the problem is, this is all we can do in this session. We've got to let this dry overnight. So we'll pick this up. The next time we get to work on this would probably be either tomorrow or the next day. Now, after this day ended and I wanted the epoxy to dry overnight, I went out to the garage and I was looking at the 650 and I was thinking how I want to make the trim on this seat, the paint trim. And I kept looking back and forth and back and forth. And I thought, you know, something that it was going through my head about a month ago, and then I just put the idea out of my mind, but I came back today and I thought about it. Maybe what I want to do with this part, I have a spare MT-09 windshield that has that little bump out on it. It's got a little triangle shaped bump running the length of the windshield. And I have a spare windshield, and I thought one of the things that I might want to consider doing, and I looked at this to try to get some ideas. Do I want to put paint trim on it? Or do I want to put that MT-09, that part from the windshield? And I guess I'm not going to know until a couple of days from now when I actually get to work on this again, because we've been doing so many different things around the house and it's the farming season and everything. But let me just show what I had in mind, and I'm going to think about it the next couple of days before I actually do it. And that's how to trim on the 650, the COWL. That's how that evolved. Now, the reason I don't want to do this right away is I want to think about this, because those little wings on the side of the windshield, they change the whole look of the nose of the bike. That little rib that goes down the middle of the windshield, if I cut that part off of the spare windshield and attach it to the COWL, it'll be a perfect match. It couldn't be any better than that. And taking a paint off will be not a big deal at all. And Bondo in a little radius, just like we did on the windshield. So in essence, it'll add a couple days to the job, but I don't care. and I wanted this part to have no screws showing, no bolts. I couldn't figure a way of doing the windshield so no screws were showing. But I would, if I found a way, I would have done it. But this will be a perfect match, and I won't know for a couple of days. That rib and on the back, because the one thing that doesn't match on the whole bike, the back of the seat is flat as a pancake. It doesn't match. The rest of the bike is all angles and points and stuff, and then there's a big flat pancake behind where you sit. That may change it. We'll see. I want to think about it for a couple days, run the idea past Karen, make the prototype part up. I have the spare windshield. And that's what happens to me. I'm always restyling things in my mind. Now, another thing, being honest, I've designed and styled and restyled many, many model airplanes. And every time I do it, I think, why didn't I think of this earlier on? Well, that little piece on the tail section, I'm going to try it. And again, next time we work in a shop, we don't get to work every day this time of the year, but we're trying to finish this project. I'm looking forward to seeing it done. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. It helps us support the channel. And thanks so much for watching.